Hey everybody, this is Cam from the Nerd Book Review. Today I will be reviewing Riven Earth by Zammar Ahmer. It is his debut novel and the first book in the Book of Astea duology. For those of you who are concerned about reading an author's debut novel on whether you're going to get a book two, this episode should be airing on June 10th. The book releases June 11th, and July 25th, the second book in the duology will release. So, you don't have long if you choose to read this book before you have to wait for book two. So no worries about that. A whole first book from an author thing. Both books will be out this summer. It is an epic fantasy. Definitely leans on the Grimdark side. You don't have to worry about like rape or like a whole lot of graphic violence or anything like that even necessarily. But we're dealing with a world where like crops are failing, there's famine, there's a new mysterious disease, people are dealing with cancer. Definitely like that grimdark world where there's not a lot of hope here, at times in this first book. This is a book that the world building is just amazing. I'll talk about the world itself here. The magic is a little bit on the lighter side, but it's more important like for the history of things than anything else. It's actually one that as I sat down to do this review, I realized that I was struggling a little bit despite absolutely loving this book and being a huge fan, because it's a book where as the story unravels, you learn the backstory, the history. You learn like why the things that are happening now are the way they are. And although we know, like what the main, struggle that they're going to deal with from the very beginning, the why of it is unraveled as the book, carries on. We don't learn like one of the key details even until, very late on into the story. And so I sat down and I was like, man, how am I going to put this review together without giving any spoilers? Because this is one of those books where you really don't want to know spoilers, or I had to be careful on how I put these out. Like I said, I really love this book, and I'm going to talk about all of the stuff that I can talk about. But this is a book where, just like Justin Lee Anderson's The Lost War, which won the SPIFBO a few years ago, where I still haven't released a second video of it because I'm just struggling. Like 3 times I've tried to do it. I did a podcast previously, but I've just found I'm having a hard time not giving spoilers as I try to talk about it. It's a book that I really liked and that I'm going to do my best to do a good review of here, especially since this is his debut novel. But let's go ahead and quit rambling and get into the world itself, and then I'll give you the people, the magic, and all the fun stuff I normally do, the bad, the good, and my final thoughts. So we have the world. It's called Astea. It is a world that, as I mentioned, is very broken. It's no longer rotating because of an event that happened thousands of years ago in the past. We do figure out what that event was, but not for most of the books, so I'm not going to talk about it. As the prologue starts, we have a forest. The forest dryads have kept humanity as their servants and kind of like, living pretty poor lives for thousands of years. The forest is basically the only place on this, on the planet of Astea where life is possible. On, one side where it's darker, you're dealing with like, incredible cold. And then, the full sun area is basically a scorching desert. Going out in it, like if it touches your bare skin, it'll burn your skin, instantly, kind of hot level, right? So at the beginning, in the prologue, the humans rise up against the dryads. A man named Isaiah, who will become the first king of the humans, his wife, who is a sun-touched. That means she's got very, very dark skin and golden eyes that they've somehow hidden for a long time. Skin color tends to be darker in this book in general, so her having dark skin isn't, necessarily unique. It's the golden eyes that mark her out. Well, you can be, born from just normal parents and become a sun-touched. It's kind of a throwback to an older lineage of humanity, and they've hidden her for a long time. She's finally found by the Dryads and is killed. This leads Isaiah to rebel against the Dryads and wipe most of them out. And then he develops he creates a human kingdom in this forest, right? The only place where the only place where life is able to thrive. The main part of the book takes place 12 years after that. Isaiah has died a year previously, and we've just gotten done with a civil war that happened when the East wanted to go back to worshiping the Dryads because they were worried that it was going to throw things off, that the Dryads and their god was what was keeping life possible. They were crushed by the current king, Kaido, who is Isaiah's son, a year before. And this has led Kaido to basically spiral into an incredible depression where he hasn't even left his room, basically, for the last year. The thought of going to a council meeting, causes him to have panic attacks. So the kingdom is being run by a woman named Raya. She was the daughter of the chief scientist of Isaiah, who his knowledge and some stuff that they'd found helped reestablish like crops and things like that, because basically we just lived off of the forest and what the Dryads let us do beforehand, so all that knowledge had been lost. Raya, she was the chief bodyguard of Kaido during the original rebellion, and now she's very competent. She is basically running the kingdom and has been for the last year after Isaiah died, and Kaido's basically been, useless. So she's going to be I guess I would call her our main character, especially early on. There's going to be 4 point of view characters, but she's going to be the one that really, that we see the most of early on. Getting back real quick just into that world, like I said, there's the forest god, there's a night god, the moon god, I guess, if you will, and then the sun god. I would say that they're definitely real. They're not like ones that we're going to see, walking around, but their influence is very important. We do get, as mentioned, the Dryads, also a race of the moon god who's called Hecate. His or her people, they're like cats. They can do some shape-shifting and stuff, but they generally have a cat-like form. They're sentient. They can speak. One of them actually speaks with Isaiah and then Kaido on a regular basis. So we definitely have, something that's really cool with all of the creatures in this world are created by Ahmer. So we're not dealing with any like horses or cows, right? Chickens, pigs, things like that. We're dealing with all created, made-up creatures. R.J. Barker and his works are probably the ones that I would say that this reminds me the most of, for sure. Because he creates his own, and he also, tends to go grimdark, but without going like, ultra violent or anything like that. This is definitely one where, relationships and things like that are more important, and, the world itself is failing, but we're not necessarily dealing with like a constant war kind of thing, right? There's going to be plenty of action, especially in like the flashbacks that we're going to get, right? So with all of that backstory in here, the main plot point that we're going to deal with in the modern timeline that we're dealing with now is that, as mentioned, 12 years, we had the rebellion after Isaiah died. Raya is basically running the kingdom at this point, and we're dealing with crops failing. There's a new mysterious disease that's come into play. A lot of people are dealing with cancer. It's called something, different in this case, but it definitely sounds an awful lot like cancer to me, which would make sense if the sun is, too powerful and things like that. And Raya's trying to figure out like why things are going wrong. We have a really like big like scientific group that's really important to the kingdom. As mentioned, we were basically slaves to the Dryads for thousands of years. We did find some information that helped like restore agriculture and move things forward a little bit, right? But that's had to be done through research and things like that. we are, Raya's trying to tell those scientists and those people that they need to figure out like what's wrong, why the crops are failing, and all that kind of stuff, so that humanity doesn't basically starve to death and civilization collapse. And that's going to be the main like real plot point, right, during this whole story. That's the big storyline. There's going to be this is a very detailed and involved book, so there's going to be plenty of like secondary plot points that are going on. But the most important one is that. We're trying to figure out, Raya in the kingdom is trying to figure out why crops are failing. I've already mentioned a couple of the point of view characters, but there are 4 point of view characters in the book. Raya, who's acting as the regent, then Kaido, as mentioned, the depressed king. Then we're going to deal with 2 of the, like old guard, if you will. Otto is his name. He is dying of cancer as the book starts. His wife dies in childbirth right off the beginning. She actually gives birth to one of those sun-touched babies. So Otto, at first, obviously he's very angry and upset that, that his wife dies, but her basically dying wish was to, find someone to take care of the baby. So that's going to be like his big plot point. He's going to serve in a lot of ways as a character that's going to give us that backstory, like as he's reminiscing as he travels. He's a really good character that gets better as the book goes on. He kind of starts off, he's prejudiced against the sun-touched because that's what the Dryads for millennia, said the sun-touched were bad, so there's still that prejudice. And then he's going to become, almost a protector as the story goes on. Then our last point of view character is Maisades. I guess I'm saying that right. Maisades. He is basically going to be our human villain character, if you will. He was basically the master of the coin, if you will, the chief economist of the kingdom. He is very, very corrupt, and a lot of the bad things that are happening in the kingdom are because he's been diverting money away from like helping people out to building himself a giant mansion and doing all kinds of stuff for the new nobles as opposed to helping the general people out. But he's very cunning. And he's going to also serve as an important character, also to learn like some of the history and the more inner workings of how the kingdom is. I know that this was definitely not my best attempt at keeping things together here on this first part of this episode. I definitely wandered a little bit. As I mentioned, I struggled even just putting this together, of trying to figure out how to, to not give spoilers at all, but give that, the good plot point and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and get into the bad, the good, and my final thoughts, because that's going to be the more important part of this episode, right? In terms of the bad, really, the only thing that for me was bad was that we jump right into things at the very beginning of the story, with that prologue and a massive battle scene. We're dealing with all made up creatures. So the Dryads, I had a pretty good image of what the Dryads were going to look like, right? If you have read fantasy books before, I imagine at some point you've come in contact with Dryads. So not a big deal. But then, dealing with like the Lomers, their cavalry, their mounts, right? They've got like these crazy like tendrils and tentacles that will pick people up and help seed them and stuff. Then there's these giant like turtle kite things that have foliage on top of them that are massive. I struggled a little bit at the very beginning, just jumping right into that battle scene. But I will mention one thing. After talking with Zammar, he actually created some sketches that is going to be in the book when it releases. That will be at the beginning of some of the chapters that will show what some of the creatures look like. It's kind of one of those cool things, like being every once in a while as a reviewer, you can talk to an author and be like, hey, this would be better if you could do this, and I understand, if you can't, kind of thing. But because I asked him to add those, at least partially because I asked him, right? He included those sketches in there, and I think that that's going to be something that will help a lot. With Michael R. Fletcher's Storm Beneath the World earlier this year, which was also completely made up like insectile world, I found that helped me so much and was a big reason why that book was a 10 out of 10 for me, because I didn't have that period where I had to figure out what things looked like. And that can sometimes take me as a movie in my mind reader out of that movie in my mind and make me think about what I'm reading instead of like just flowing. So I think that having that there will really help with that. But you know what, that learning those creatures and things like that, that's really the only thing that I struggled with, and just right off the bat at the very beginning. In terms of the good, this book is... the world building is just amazing. I felt like the world was alive. I loved the backstory. It also, as far as like how it does the backstory, I have mentioned in a bunch of these reviews, I don't like it when characters are the ones that are giving you the backstory in their mind, or they're explaining things to another character who clearly should know. Like, I don't like that as the way that we get the backstory or the world building, right? I don't like those kind of info dumps. I like a library scene or something like that. In this case, we have King Isaiah's journal, and at the beginning, or more often at the end of a chapter, we'll have an excerpt from his journal, and that serves as world building and some of the backstory, where we learn about like even some more of the history of the world due to something that Isaiah did that I'm not going to talk about because I don't want to give spoilers. But I just find that is one of my favorite ways to do info dumps, if you will. I love like journals or excerpts. Same thing, going back to Michael R. Fletcher and his Storm Beneath the World, did the same thing at the beginning of each chapter with like journal entries, right? I just love that style. It helps so that a character themselves, they don't have to be giving us any of those, that info dump, like even in their musing thoughts, right? I feel like for me, the way that I read with that move in my mind, like if a character gets to stay in doing what they're doing and never have to stop to think about the history or something, it helps me out so much. Just the world building in general was wonderful in this book. I thought that the way the world was created, the part that makes it grimdark was amazing. The fantastical creatures that we deal with are great. All in all, I just found that every part of this world, when I started reading this book, I just could not put it down. Then the last thing that I really, really enjoyed about this book was the way the story unfolded, in a way that even though we know like the general big like plot line, we know the backstory of like the kingdom itself and how it came to be founded, and we have a pretty darn good idea. I think that like I knew what the big reveal was going to be from the very beginning, but the mystery of all of the extra stuff and the way the story unfolded really just kept me wanting to keep reading and wanted me to keep moving forward to learn all those details, right? This was a story that, the big reveal was, we knew what the bad thing was, right? And what needed to be fixed. And we knew, even if the people in the book didn't necessarily know, as a reader, I had a pretty good idea right off the bat. But all those details and the little plot twists and turns, there wasn't like a crazy plot twist or turn, but there were lots of little things here and there that really just like tied in together really well and just made me enjoy reading this. Now, my final thoughts. This is, Zammar's debut novel. And honestly, this was my favorite epic fantasy debut novel since Deborah Wolf's Dragon's Legacy, which is another one that I keep saying I'm going to go back and redo because I only have a podcast episode on it, and I'd really love to have a video episode for her book. But I'm going to put this one right up there with hers and Crystal Mattar's The Legacy of the Brightwash, of like three of my absolute favorite debut novels ever. I know that's crazy to say sometimes, but I just loved every part of this story. Like I mentioned that right off the bat, it was a little chaotic and a little bit hard to follow. But as soon as we got to chapter 1, and, we learned as I started the story, I loved the structure of the book. I loved the world building. I loved the story. I thought that all 4 point of view characters provided us a different piece of the story, and they were really complementary. I really just enjoy this book just so much, and I really recommend, if you like R.J. Barker, or you are a fan of a dark, this, I would really call this grimdark, but a grimdark that's not going to throw rape or, ultra violent scenes at you, then I feel like this is a novel that that you should read and that you're going to enjoy reading. And it's not going to turn people off in the same way that sometimes, like, say, Mark Lawrence, there's certain people that just don't like that level of violence. Or even George R.R. Martin's, Game of Thrones, there is sometimes an insane level of violence and that just people can get turned off by. I feel like this is a novel that, even though it's grimdark, just a general epic fantasy fan is going to really enjoy. I think it's going to have a wide appeal as a just fantasy reader. The same way that I recommend R.J. Barker, to a lot of people that want a darker fantasy novel but don't want a whole lot of unwanted extra violence or, assaults and things like that. So I think this is a book that I could certainly recommend to a wide range of people just in the fantasy genre in general. If you like world building, if you like a little bit of mythology and mystery to go within your story. Just all in all, I obviously, the way I'm talking about this is a 10 out of 10 for me. This is going to be my book of the year list. I don't see how I'm going to have another debut novel that knocks it off the list for sure. And at this point, this is my favorite book that I've currently read in 2024. It's probably going to go somewhere around like 4 or 5 on my at this point, like top 15 or 20 list. But it's the best one I've read that was written in 2024. So excited to read book 2, which I should get an arc for here pretty quick. And like I said, it releases in about 2 months. Book 2 does. So if you like book 1, you don't have to wait too long for book 2. Absolutely recommending this book to anyone that that likes epic fantasy, that likes darker fantasy, or even that generally doesn't know if they really like dipping their toes into grimdark too often. I think that you would enjoy this book. This episode is coming on Monday. I know that I said in my previous couple of videos that have gone out that I was going to do all Spiffbo novels coming out, all Spiffbo episodes that were going to be coming out. But before we go, blog team, the Spiffbo leadership team has asked me to get all 6 of the videos that I'm going to do for Spiffbo for the quick reviews of all 30 of our books. They've asked me to get those done in the first 3 weeks so that we can start making cuts after that. Now, we don't want to start making cuts on day 1 so people don't just immediately get knocked out. And don't get to enjoy any of their Spiffbo experience, but we are going to start doing that about the beginning of that first month at the latest. So this episode is going to come out on Wednesday and Friday of this week. I will have 2 more Spiffbo ones come out, and then next week there will be 2 more as well. And then that will be the end of those for a little while. And then I'll start doing semifinal episodes as we get them. But, we're going to have, more of my normal episodes coming out after that. I was planning initially on doing 1 episode a week of those Spiffbo for 6 weeks, but they want to start making cuts before that. And I don't want to have, these review episodes coming out after a book's already been cut for some reason. All right. Hopefully I cleaned up this episode quite a bit in editing and it's not too rambly. I hope you guys all enjoy your reading and have a wonderful day. Thanks.